A simple note left by a homeless woman radically changed the life of a billionaire. What was written in that note moved a room to tears and reminded everyone what faith means. It was a routine press conference at a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. Journalists sipped their coffee, cameras flashed, conversations hummed in the background, but no one could have predicted. A small piece of paper held in weathered hands would silence the whole room and shatter hearts. In the hall was Elon Musk, dressed as usual in a black t-shirt under his jacket. That familiar seriousness in his eyes, that familiar confidence in his posture. He was going to talk about technology, Mars, artificial intelligence. It was a show everyone was used to. But that day, something completely different was going to take the stage. There was a woman sitting in the very back corner of the hall, almost invisibly in the shadows. Teresa. Her shoes were in tatters, her face red from the cold, her hair disheveled. But in her eyes, the last shred of hope shone. She held a crumpled note in her hand. He had spent the night under the lamp by the train station, rewriting it. He hadn't come to be saved. He had come to be heard. Teresa was once a nurse. She was a smiling mother, a woman full of life. But first she lost her daughter to leukemia, then her job to the pandemic, then her home. Life collapsed on her, but she still held on to something. Faith. When he heard about the press conference, a voice from the bottom of his heart told him to go. Not to meet Elon Musk, to ask a question. Questions were coming from the whole Mars missions, artificial intelligence projects, new Tesla models. But Teresa was waiting. He kept folding the note in his hand, holding it tightly, despite his fingers numb from the cold. And when the moderator finally said, "We can take one last question," Teresa stood up. There was a stir in the hall. The cameras turned to her. Elon squinted at her, an extraordinary person, a fact that grinned in the crowd of that luxury hotel. As Teresa walked to the microphone, the hall stopped humming. Even her footsteps echoed. Then she spoke. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice forked but clear. "I can't do anything. I just want an honest answer." A heaviness fell over the room. What do you do when you've lost everything, but you feel you still have something left inside you to give? A heaviness fell on the room. What do you do when you've lost everything, but you feel there's still something left inside you to give? Everyone in the room held their breath, waiting for an answer. But this was not a press question. This was a real cry from the heart. Elon's hands came off the lectern. There was a change in his expression. He was no longer a billionaire, no longer a CEO. He was just a man, and he seemed to have no answer to this question. At that moment, time seemed to stop. Not a camera clicked, not a chair creaked. Everyone in the room stared at Elon, but he wasn't talking. He couldn't speak. As they waited for the words of a CEO, a leader, a genius, a man's inner collapse was being silently brought to the stage. Elon slowly shifted his eyes to the note in Teresa's hands. The paper was worn, but there were more than words. A life, a pain, a prayer. He took a step back, took a deep breath, and finally spoke. "This is not an easy question," he said. His voice was softer than usual, because sometimes it seems like you have everything, but inside you have nothing left. His eyes were still on Teresa, his voice shaky but determined. "I've lost it too," she said. "I lost my insides, my sleep, my faith. I lost it." A few people in the hall bowed their heads. Some of them could not hold back their tears.
Elon continued, "When my first company went under, when I didn't speak to my father for years, and most of all, when I lost my son, the sentence was incomplete. Something caught in his throat. Teresa was still holding the note, but it was no longer just her story. It was their mutual silence. The hall was still deathly silent. Elon Musk bowed his head slightly. His eyes were on the ground. The man posing for the cameras was gone. Instead, there was a father, a son, a human being lost in himself. His voice cracked. "I don't know about you, but I'm so tired of looking strong," he said. "People only want to remember you for your achievements, but what you remember most is what you lost." A woman in the back sniffled. The young man next to her wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his jacket. Teresa was still standing, but no longer alone. Elon looked up. "I lost my son. He was only 10 weeks old. We named him Nevada, and one morning he wasn't breathing." His words fell on the hall like a hammer. That moment was not just one man's pain. The common morning of all hearts echoed. "That was the day," said Elon, and I turned my back on God because I asked why, and I didn't get any answer. A journalist looked up. His eyes were full. A mother took a handkerchief out of her purse and wept silently.
Elon continued. I made a decision that day. I was either going to collapse completely, or I would find a reason, a meaning. Teresa's eyes filled with tears. The note in his hand was still shaking, and in that moment, both had passed through the same void without ever knowing each other. Two people who understood each other even without sharing their pain. Elon took a deep breath in silence. His eyes were still full, but his voice had recovered. He looked at Teresa. "What does your note say?" he asked. His voice was both low and full of genuine curiosity. Teresa hesitated for a moment. Dozens of eyes in the hall were on him. But then,
he opened the note with trembling hands. The edges of the paper were frayed, the letters faded, but the meaning inside was just being born. His voice was slow but clear. "If one day someone recognizes me, I just want to tell them this. I still believe that people are good, that being heard, being recognized, saves lives." There was no sound from the hall, only the eyes, only silent sobs.
As Elon held Teresa's note in his hand, he didn't speak. He couldn't speak. He just looked at a small piece of paper, but like looking at a whole world. Then he looked around the room. The cameras were still rolling, but no one was looking for headlines anymore. Journalists had stopped taking notes. People had just become people. Elon looked up. "We're here to talk about technology, about space, about the tools of the future," he said. "But maybe that's not what we should be talking about." Whispers rose from the crowd, but this time it wasn't gossip, it was awareness. Elon continued. "Someone asked me today, what do you do when you've lost everything but you still have something left in you?" Then he turned to Teresa. "You know the answer," he said. Teresa looked up. Her eyes were full, but she stared. There was a courage in her now that she had suppressed for years. Elon turned and addressed the room. "Today we are not having a press conference. Today we are silent together. We are witnessing the courage of a woman, the strength of a spirit that is lost but has not lost faith." At that moment, there was no applause in the hall, because no one could bring themselves to applaud. There were only tears, and behind the tears echoed a silent revolution, the fact that humanity is still alive.
No one in the room was still speaking, but the silence was no longer suffocating. It was healing. It was like a kind of prayer, wordless, but effective. Elon slowly stepped down from the podium. He took his steps carefully, as if he was confronting his past with each step. Finally, he stood right in front of Teresa, not as a CEO, but as a man, a father, a son. They locked eyes. Neither said anything at first.
There was no need for words. Elon bent his knees slightly, got down to Teresa's eye level, extended his hand, but not to shake hands, but to offer gratitude. "You reminded me today of something I've lost for years," he said. "Sincerity, purity, faith." 2 tears fell from Teresa's eyes, but they were tears, no longer of pain, but of acceptance after so many years. Elon took a thick black pen out of his pocket and wrote something on the back of Teresa's note. He handed the paper back to her. Teresa turned it over with trembling hands. There were only 3 words. "You have been noticed." At that moment, many people in the hall began to cry, some silently, some with a handkerchief pressed to their chest. But everyone felt the same thing: the heart of a woman, the change of a man, and the collective transformation of a room. Months later, a woman began working at a small charity center in Chicago. She was delivering coffee, listening to people, sitting quietly with the orphans. Her name, Teresa. She no longer had a note in her hand, but a heart that was the answer to other people's notes. And in the corner of her office, a framed piece of paper stood. On it were written these 3 words: "You've been seen." If this story touched you, maybe one day you'll make someone feel noticed, because sometimes a single word, a single look, a single note, it could save a life.